The great hall of the Galactic Council was filled with thousands of beings from across the stars. Some had scales that shone like metal. Others had skin that changed color with their mood. A few floated in special tanks filled with strange liquids. They had come from 100 different worlds, speaking 100 different languages. But today, they all spoke with one voice. "The vote is complete," announced High Al. His gray skin stretched tight over his skull as he smiled. "Humanity will remain restricted to the Sol system. Their expansion is hereby frozen." Captain Park stood at the back of the chamber. He wore the simple black uniform of the Terran fleet. His face showed nothing. No anger, no surprise. He had expected this result. For 200 years, humans had served the Council. They had built stations in the darkest corners of space. They had healed the sick. They had fed the hungry. They had asked for only one thing in return: full membership, a seat at the table, a voice that mattered. 47 times they had asked. 47 times they had been refused. Doctor stood beside the captain. She had spent her whole life studying alien species. She had cured diseases that had killed millions. Last year, she had saved an entire colony from a plague that their own doctors could not understand. They had thanked her with flowers and songs. Today, they voted to cage her people forever. "They call us unpredictable," she whispered to Park. "That is their word for dangerous." The captain nodded slowly. "They have feared us since the day we arrived. We thought we could earn their trust. We were wrong." Ambassador Shin walked to the center of the chamber. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She had served the diplomatic corps for 40 years. She had shaken hands with emperors and held dying children in war zones. Nothing had prepared her for this moment. The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to her. "Distinguished members of the Council," she began. Her voice was soft but clear. 200 years ago, humanity came to this chamber for the first time. We came with open hands. We came with hope in our hearts. We asked to be your partners, your friends, your equals. She paused and looked around the room. They would not meet her eyes. The other species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "You taught us many things," Shin continued. "You taught us that friendship must be earned. We earned it 1,000 times over. You taught us that trust takes time. We gave you 2 centuries. You taught us that actions speak louder than words. So today, we will let our actions speak." She straightened her back and lifted her chin. "We came seeking partnership. We leave seeking nothing from you at all. May your stars shine bright. Goodbye." She turned and walked out of the chamber. Parkin followed her. They did not look back. The council members watched them go. Some laughed. Others whispered to each other. High Al raised his glass in celebration. "The human problem is solved," he declared. "Tonight we feast." But not everyone celebrated. An old from a small world named sat quietly in his seat. He had lived for 300 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had learned one thing in all that time: quiet enemies are the most dangerous kind. Over the next 6 months, humanity kept its word. They did not protest. They did not threaten. They did not beg. They simply left. Admiral oversaw the withdrawal from her command ship. She watched as human engineers packed up their tools at 100 space stations. She watched as human doctors closed their clinics on alien worlds. She watched as human teachers said goodbye to their students. "Make sure nothing is damaged," she ordered her officers. "We leave everything exactly as we found it. Let no one say we left in anger." One of her young officers, a man named, frowned at his console. "Admiral, they are demanding we leave our medical database behind. They say it belongs to the Council." Shook her head. "That database was built by human researchers using human resources. It belongs to humanity. We will take it with us." "They will be furious." "They will survive." The Admiral's voice was cold. "Or they will not. That is no longer our concern." On the colony world of New Sol, a young pilot named loaded the last cargo containers onto her ship. She had grown up on this world. She had learned to fly in its blue skies. She had fallen in love under its twin moons. Now she was leaving forever. Her co-pilot, an older man named O, put a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" "I keep waiting to feel angry," she said quietly. "But I just feel tired of trying to prove we deserve to exist." "Maybe that is why we are leaving," O replied. "We are done proving anything to anyone." Climbed into her pilot seat and started the engines. The ship rose slowly into the air. Below her, the empty streets of New Seoul grew smaller and smaller. She looked back once, just once. Then she turned her eyes forward and flew toward human space. Behind her, the council celebrated their victory. They called it the containment success. They gave medals to the politicians who had made it possible. They wrote songs about the day they had saved the galaxy from the unpredictable humans. They did not notice the silence that followed the last human ship. They did not understand that silence could be louder than any war. They would learn. 3 years had passed since the humans left. High Al sat in his office and stared at the reports on his desk. Each one brought worse news than the last. The space station above Prime had stopped working. Its power systems had failed 2 months ago. The engineers had tried to fix it, but they could not understand the human designs. The station was slowly falling out of orbit. In 3 weeks, it would crash into the planet below. "How many people live on Prime?" Al asked his assistant. 400 million, High. Al closed his eyes. 400 million lives, and there was nothing he could do to save them. This was not the only disaster. Across Council space, everything was falling apart. The humans had built so much. They had maintained so much. No one had realized how much until they were gone. Trade Minister O sat in his small office on Earth and read the same reports. He had stayed behind when most humans left. His job was to watch, to record, to remember. "The colonies are starving," he said to Dr. Han, who sat across from him. "Their food shipments depended on human cargo routes. No one else knows how to navigate the drift safely." Han was a historian. She had spent her life studying how civilizations rose and fell. Now she was watching one fall in real time. "They are dying too," she said quietly. "There is a plague spreading through their core worlds. Their doctors cannot stop it." O nodded. "We developed the cure for that plague 12 years ago. Doctor led the research team. She offered it to the council for free. And now they do not have it, and we are not sharing." Han looked out the window at the peaceful city below. Children played in parks. Families ate dinner together. Life continued as normal. "Does that make us cruel?" she asked. O thought about this for a long time. "The council had 200 years to treat us as equals. They chose not to. We owe them nothing, but—" he paused. "I do not feel good about watching them suffer." "Neither do I." Al was learning what desperation felt like. He had sent 12 diplomatic missions to Earth. Each one had been received politely. Each one had been given tea and comfortable chairs and pleasant conversation. Each one had been sent home with nothing. The humans did not yell. They did not make demands. They did not gloat. They simply said no. "We wish you well in your endeavors," was all they would say. "But we cannot help you." Al had tried everything. He had offered money. He had offered technology. He had offered full council membership. The humans had smiled and shook their heads. "We have everything we need," they said. "Thank you for the offer." The worst part was their kindness. Al could have understood anger. He could have fought against hatred. But this gentle refusal was something he could not break through. One night he stood on his balcony and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was thriving. His spies had sent back reports. The humans had colonized new worlds. They had built beautiful cities. They had developed technologies the council could not even understand. They were doing better without the council than they had ever done with it. "What have we done?" Al whispered to the empty sky. The Empire had begun to move. For centuries, they had been held back by human diplomats. Humans had a strange gift for talking to angry species. They could find common ground where none seemed to exist. They could turn enemies into friends. Without them, they saw opportunity. Their warships crossed into Council space. They took 3 colony worlds in the first month. The Council sent a fleet to stop them. The fleet was destroyed in less than a day. "Why will the humans not help us?" screamed the from whose was next in the path. "We are dying, do they not care?" An old named stood slowly. He was the same one who had watched the humans leave 3 years ago. He had said nothing then. He would say something now. "You ask why they do not help," said. His voice was weak with age but steady. "Let me ask you a question. When the humans asked for help, what did we do?" The chamber fell silent. "When they asked for fair treatment, what did we do? When they asked for simple respect, what did we do?" Looked around the room. "We laughed at them. We called them animals. We locked them in a cage and celebrated our wisdom." He pointed a thin finger at the stars visible through the chamber window. "Now they are free, now they are strong, now they are happy, and we are the ones in a cage," he laughed bitterly. "They did not trap us, we trapped ourselves. The humans simply stopped holding the door open." Al watched a hologram of a human colony world. It was called New. Green forests covered its mountains. Clean rivers flowed through its valleys. Children played in streets where no one feared the sky. His own children were hiding in bunkers, waiting for bombs. He had done this. He had voted to contain humanity. He had called it wisdom. He had called it safety. He had been so very wrong. The silence of the humans was the loudest sound in the galaxy. It was the sound of a door closing. It was the sound of a bridge burning. It was the sound of 200 years of patience finally running out. And it was only the beginning. 10 years had passed since the withdrawal. The human territories were now called the Terran Sovereignty, and they were beautiful. President stood on the balcony of his office on New Terra and watched the sunset. 2 suns sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. This world had been a dead rock when humans first arrived. Now it was a garden. "The Genesis array is ready, President," said Chief Engineer. She was a small woman with tired eyes and oil-stained hands. She had spent 8 years building something impossible. "Show me," said. They walked through the capital city together. The streets were clean and green. Trees lined every road. Children played in parks while their parents watched from nearby cafes. There were no soldiers on the corners. There were no walls around the city. There was no fear. The Genesis array sat in a valley outside the city. It was a ring of metal and light, 2 kilometers wide. Energy flowed through it like blood through a heart. "What does it do?" asked, though he already knew. Smiled. "It creates stable wormholes. We can travel anywhere in the galaxy in seconds. The Council's fastest ships take months to cross the same distance." "How far ahead of them are we?" 3 generations, maybe 4, looked at the machine she had built. "When they locked us away, they thought they were making us weak. Instead, they set us free. We stopped trying to fit into their system and built our own." Commander joined them at the array. He was older now, his hair turning gray, but his eyes were still sharp. "We have a situation at the border," he said. "Refugee ships." Frowned. "From where?" "Council space. Hundreds of them. They are fleeing the—" They returned to the capital and watched the sensor feeds. Thousands of ships drifted at the edge of Terran space. They were damaged and overcrowded. Many were running out of fuel. "They are dying out there," said Doctor. She had joined the President's Council years ago. Her hair was white now, but her voice was still strong. "Without help, half of them will not survive the week." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. "These are the same people who voted to cage us," said Admiral. She was old now, nearly 90, but she still commanded respect. "They celebrated when we left. They called us animals. Yes, said quietly, they did. And now they come begging for help. Yes, they do. Looked at the president for a long moment. What do you want to do? Walked to the window and looked out at his beautiful city. He thought about his parents, who had lived their whole lives under council rules. He thought about his grandparents, who had died never seeing humanity treated with respect. He thought about what kind of people humans wanted to be. We will help them, he said finally, not because they deserve it, but because helping those in need is who we are. The sovereignty opened its borders. Refugee camps were built on 3 different worlds. Human doctors treated the sick. Human farmers fed the hungry. Human teachers taught the children. Among the refugees was a young girl named Sira. She was 5 years old. Her parents had died in an attack. She had no one left in the universe. A human family on Nu took her in. They were named Commander's younger brother and his wife. They had no children of their own. "Are you scared of us?" asked Mrs. on the first night. She had made soup for the little girl. Sierra looked up at her with big silver eyes. "My father said humans were dangerous." "Do we seem dangerous to you?" The little girl thought about this. The soup was warm. The bed was soft. The humans smiled at her. "No," she said, "you seem kind." Mrs. hugged her gently. "We try to be." President addressed the sovereignty on the anniversary of the withdrawal. His speech was broadcast to every human world. 10 years ago we left council space, he said. They called us unpredictable. Perhaps they were right. They predicted we would rage. We did not. They predicted we would beg. We did not. They predicted we would fade away. We did not. He paused and looked into the camera. We simply became better without them. We built worlds where children can play without fear. We created technology that would seem like magic to our ancestors. We made a society where kindness is strength and cruelty is weakness. Now refugees come to our doors. They come from the same people who rejected us. Some say we should turn them away. Some say they earned their suffering. Shook his head slowly. But we are not them. We do not punish children for the sins of their parents. We do not let people die to prove a point. We help because we can, because it is right, because that is what makes us human. At the border, Commander watched the Council warships gathering in the distance. They did not dare cross into Terran space. They knew what would happen if they tried. "They are scared of us," said his young son. The boy was only 12, but he already wanted to be a pilot like his father. "Yes," agreed, "they are. But we would never attack them, right? We are not like that." Put a hand on his son's shoulder. "No, we are not like that. We do not need to destroy others to prove we are strong. Our strength is in what we build, not what we break." Nodded slowly. "I think I understand." Good. Looked back at the stars. "Remember that, no matter what happens, remember who we are." 15 years after the withdrawal, the Empire had conquered nearly half of Council space. Their warships moved from world to world like a plague of metal and fire. Nothing could stop them. High Al stood in the war room beneath Council Prime. His gray skin had grown pale with age and worry. Around him, generals and admirals argued about strategies that had already failed. "We have 3 days," said his military advisor. "Maybe less. The fleet will reach Council Prime by then." "How many ships do we have left?" "Not enough." Al closed his eyes. This was the end. Centuries of civilization, millions of years of history. All of it would burn because of choices he had made 15 years ago. "There is one option," said Old. He was nearly 400 years old now, kept alive by machines, but his mind was still sharp. "We ask the humans." "They have refused us 40 times, Al said bitterly. "Why would they help now?" "We do not ask them to fight for us. We ask them to save our civilians, our children, our future." His voice cracked. "Even if our worlds burn, our people could survive." Al stared at the Old for a long moment. Then he nodded. Send the message. On New Terra, President read the request with the full council of the sovereignty. Admiral was there, now over 100 years old but still sharp. Commander had become a general. His son was now a pilot just as he had dreamed. And Sira was there too. She was 20 years old now. She had grown up human in every way that mattered, but her silver eyes reminded everyone where she came from. They want us to evacuate their civilians, said. They are not asking for military help, just rescue. Let them burn, said one. They earned this. They laughed when we left, said another. They celebrated our containment. Why should we risk our people to save theirs? The room erupted in argument. Old wounds reopened. Old anger flowed like poison. Sira stood quietly and watched. She thought about her human parents. She thought about the soup Mrs. had made her on that first night. She thought about what it meant to be human. May I speak? She asked. The room fell silent. Everyone knew her story, the orphan girl who had become a daughter of humanity. I am by blood, Sira said. Her voice was steady. My people rejected yours. They called you animals. They feared your potential and tried to cage you. She looked around the room at every face. I know this because I have studied it. I have read every document. I have watched every recording. I understand why you are angry. Your anger is righteous. She paused. But I am also Terran by choice. I was raised by humans. I learned your values. I know what you believe. She pointed at the symbol on the wall. It showed a human hand reaching upward toward the stars. You believe that strength is not about what you can destroy. It is about what you can protect. You believe that kindness is not weakness. It is courage. You believe that the measure of a people is not how they treat their friends. It is how they treat those who have wronged them. Her voice grew stronger. If you turn away now, you will survive. The sovereignty will be safe. But you will lose something more important than safety. You will lose who you are. Sira looked directly at President. I am asking you to be better than they were, please. The room was silent for a long time. Then Admiral stood slowly, her old bones creaking. The girl is right, she said. I have hated the council for most of my life, but I did not spend 100 years building this nation just to watch it become as cruel as our enemies. She looked at. We helped them, not for their sake, for ours. Nodded. Operation Lighthouse begins in 6 hours. The Terran fleet arrived at Council Prime 2 days later. 400 ships, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, but they carried no weapons. They carried hope. Admiral commanded from the bridge of the TFS Promise. She was too old for this. She knew it. She did not care. Begin evacuation, she ordered. Priority is children and medical cases. We have 72 hours before they arrive. Human ships landed on Council Prime. Human soldiers helped families onto transports. Human doctors treated the wounded. Human pilots flew through fire to rescue stranded civilians. Flew one of those rescue ships. He had trained his whole life for this moment, not for war, for salvation. I have 300 civilians on board, he reported to command, heading back to the fleet. Good work, pilot. There is another group waiting at Sector 7. On my way. He flew through chaos and fire. He watched ships destroy buildings and burn cities. He saw things that would haunt his dreams for years. But he also saw children looking up at him with hope in their eyes. He saw parents weeping with gratitude. He saw the very people who had once rejected humanity now trusting humans with everything they had. The Supreme Commander sent a transmission to Admiral. You defend those who rejected you, he said. His face was covered in battle scars. Why, they are not your people, they called you vermin. Looked at the commander for a long moment. You are right, she said. They rejected us, they insulted us, they tried to cage us like animals. She straightened her old back and lifted her chin. But we do not decide who deserves to live based on how they treated us. We defend those who cannot defend themselves. That is what makes us human. That is what you will never understand." She cut the transmission. In 72 hours, the Terran fleet evacuated 200 million civilians. They filled every ship to capacity. They worked without sleep. Some human soldiers died protecting children they had never met. On the final day, Sierra stood at the viewport of the Promise and watched Council Prime burn. The world where her species had been born was dying. She felt tears on her cheeks. Mrs. stood beside her and held her hand. "I am sorry," the old woman whispered. "They did it to themselves," Sierra said, "but it still hurts." "Of course it does." Mrs. squeezed her hand. "That is because you have a human heart." Behind them in the cargo bays, children listened as human soldiers sang them lullabies. They did not understand the words, but they understood the kindness. And for the first time in 15 years, the galaxy saw what humanity truly was. Not conquerors, not warriors, not enemies. Guardians. 25 years had passed since the withdrawal. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Empire was gone, not destroyed by war but contained by something stronger. A coalition of species led by humanity had surrounded them, not with weapons, with trade, with diplomacy, with patience. They had learned that conquest was expensive, peace was profitable. One by one, their conquered worlds had been freed. One by one, their leaders had been replaced by those who wanted to build instead of burn. The old Galactic Council no longer existed. In its place stood the new Galactic Assembly. Every species had an equal voice. Every world had representation. And at the center of it all stood humanity. Not as rulers, as partners. Chancellor Sierra stood at the podium of the assembly. She was 45 years old now. Her silver eyes shone in the chamber lights, but when she spoke, her words were human. 25 years ago today, she said, humanity left this galaxy behind. They did not leave in anger. They did not leave in hatred. They left in silence. And that silence was the loudest sound any of us had ever heard. The chamber was full. Representatives from 100 species listened. Many of them remembered the old days. Many of them carried shame in their hearts. They could have fought, Sierra continued. They could have conquered. We know now that they had the power to do so. Their technology was generations ahead of ours. Their ships could have swept through council space like fire through dry grass. She paused and looked around the room. But they chose differently. They chose to build instead of destroy. They chose to grow instead of conquer. They chose to become better while we became worse. Elder Park sat in the audience. He was very old now, nearly 120. His hands shook and his eyes were clouded, but he had insisted on being here today. He remembered the day he had stood in this same chamber as a young captain. He remembered watching Ambassador Shin say goodbye. He remembered thinking that humanity would never return to this place. He had been wrong about many things, but he was glad he had been wrong about that. And when we fell, Sierra said, when our worlds burned and our people screamed, they came back, not as conquerors, as saviors. They risked their lives to save those who had wronged them. They opened their hearts to those who had closed doors in their faces. She wiped a tear from her eye. I was one of those they saved, a little girl with no family and no hope. They gave me a home, they gave me love, they gave me everything. Sat in the human delegation. She was the same woman who had piloted the last cargo ship out of council space 25 years ago. She had looked back once that day. Today she looked forward. That is why I stand here today, Sierra said. Not as human, but as something new, something better, a child of both worlds, a bridge between peoples. She gestured to a covered monument behind her. Today we unveil a memorial, not for the dead though we remember them, not for the war though we mourn it, but for the lesson we must never forget. The covering fell away. The monument was simple, a human hand and an alien hand reaching toward each other. Between them, a single word in every language of the galaxy. Together. The inscription reads, Sira said, they asked for nothing, they were given less, they became more. May we remember what blindness costs. The chamber erupted in applause. Species that had hated each other for centuries stood side by side and clapped. Old wounds did not disappear, but they began to heal. After the ceremony, Elder Park walked through the museum that had been built beside the memorial. His old ship, the Horizon's Edge, stood in the central hall. Children ran around it, laughing. A young student approached him. The boy was nervous. His scales rippled with anxiety. "Are you Captain Park?" the boy asked. "I was, a long time ago." The boy looked up at the ship, then back at the old man. "Is it true what they say, that humans could have conquered us all?" Park smiled. His old face creased with 1,000 wrinkles. "Probably," he said. "We had the power, we had the technology, we had every reason to be angry." "Then why did you not do it?" Park put a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Because then we would have become you, and we rather liked being us." The boy thought about this for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "I think I understand." "Good." Park looked up at his old ship. "Remember that, no matter what happens, remember who you choose to be." In the assembly chamber, gave the final address. "We departed quietly," she said, "because loud departures are for those who hope to return. We had no such hope. We simply chose to live well." She looked around at the hundreds of species gathered before her. "That you eventually chose to live with us. That was your decision, and we are glad you made it." She smiled. "The galaxy is large. There is room for all of us. Let us walk forward together." Admiral stood at the viewport of his flagship and watched the celebrations below. Fireworks painted the sky above Council Prime, rebuilt from the ashes. Ships from 100 worlds flew in formation. His father had died 5 years ago. His mother was old and tired, but they had both lived to see this day. Sira joined him at the viewport. "Thinking about your parents?" she asked. "Yes, and about what my father told me when I was 12. "What did he say?" Smiled. "He said our strength is in what we build, not what we break." Sira nodded. He was right. Below them, on the surface of Council Prime, a human child and a child played together in a park. Their parents sat on nearby benches. One human couple, one couple. They were neighbors. They were friends. They were finally equals. The human child fell and scraped her knee. The child helped her up and dusted her off. "Are you okay?" the child asked. "Yes," the human child said. "Thank you." They went back to playing. Their parents smiled and returned to their conversation. Above them the stars shone bright. Humanity had reached for those stars long ago, seeking partnership. They had been rejected. They had been contained. They had been dismissed. But they had never given up on kindness. And in the end, kindness had won.